This video reviews Federalist 10, and it goes over kind of the notes and the discussion that we had in class. So Federalist 10 is the first of the Federalist papers that we're going to look at that are written to try and convince people that the newly designed Constitution was a needed improvement over the Articles of Confederation system. This particular Federalist paper is written by James Madison, and the overall thesis, or one of the main points of the document, is that a democracy, like the type of government the United States was trying to implement in the Constitution, would work much better in a larger geographic area like the United States. So one of the key things that Madison wrote about in Federalist 10 is something called factions. He uses the word dozens of times throughout the actual paper. And by faction, he's basically talking about a group of people that are united by like a similar belief system or like a similar like thought process. So it may be a little bit different than what he thought about, but if you think about like political parties, these people are groups, or these entities are groups, and they're generally joined by people that think very similarly on an issue or a series of like political issues. So he talked a lot about factions, which basically he's just using as a synonym for a group of people that think the same way. So one of the things that Madison argued about was some of the negatives of like factions. And he talked about how that there are only really two ways that any society can get rid of like political groups. The first is you take away any kind of like freedom, right? You don't give them the freedom to think differently in the first place. That's clearly not a great option to have a society without freedom of thought, or you take away any kind of like freedom or liberty to think the way you want about politics. The other way that you get rid of political groups is you force everyone to sort of like think the same way, which again, that's not a great solution. So he argued that like factions are inevitable, like they're going to happen, and this like ties in to his overall sort of like argument that a democracy like the United States is going to work better in a larger area. And he kind of focuses on three separate reasons on why he feels like a larger country is just better for a democracy to work. The first is that he sort of argued, right, that a larger country will help control like the negative effects of like groups compared to like a much smaller country or smaller society. So this is sort of like his premise. His argument is a larger country equals more people. Just like playing the averages. In a bigger geographically sized country, you're just likely to have more people. If you have more people, you're much more likely to have more factions, lots of different groups, because lots of people think differently the more people you have. So again, the larger the country, the more people, like the more like factions or groups you're bound to have within that country. And the benefit of having more groups is that if you have more groups, you're basically having those groups split up the power, and it's less likely that one group is going to be able to abuse power. So that's his argument. Bigger country equals more people. More people, there's going to be lots of groups. If we have lots of groups, we're going to be less likely to have one group take control of power for themselves and abuse it. So it's one benefit of a larger country is it controls factions. Because his argument is like you can't get rid of factions, so a larger country just helps to deal with their effects. All right. Second reason, I would advise that you pause the video, you take a second to read the quote either on the screen or within your packet that you've been provided, and we'll sort of like talk about the significance of it. All right. So another additional benefit that Madison is talking about that comes from a larger democracy, if you read the quote, hopefully this is what you got out of it, is that in a larger country, we're just likely to get a larger pool of candidates that might run for office. So a larger country is going to have more people. And if we have more people, we might have more people that are interested in running for office and being the government officials. And if we have a larger pool of candidates to choose from, just playing the averages, we're just likely to get better quality candidates, right? So that's the second benefit of a larger country trying to have a democracy is that in order for democracy to work, you're going to have good elected officials. And in a bigger country, you're going to have more people to choose from. So hopefully that just increases the odds of getting better quality of candidates. All right, next reason. Again, I advise you to read the quote to yourself, pause the video, read it in your packet, see if you can't figure out like what's going on in the quote, and then we'll sort of like review it. All right. The last additional benefit that Madison is talking about that will lead to the benefits of a democracy in a large country, the United States, is that there'll just be more people, which means more eligible voters. And if you have more people that are able to vote, it's just less likely that some kind of cunning, tricky politician is going to trick the voters into making a bad choice. That hopefully, with more eligible voters, you're just likely to get a better decision that's going to be made, right? If it was a smaller group, maybe you could kind of trick more people and that could lead to impacting the decision they make. But in a larger country with more people, there's more voters and it's just going to be harder to trick a majority of the voters. So again, the premise is that a democracy is going to work better in a larger area, and that a larger democracy will be good because it'll control factions. It'll provide potentially better rulers to choose from, and also more voters, which means it'll be harder to trick them.